Alrighty, so in today's video, we're taking a look at the AnkerMake M5. This is a 3D printer I've been using for the past 2 weeks. AnkerMake reached out to me and asked if I wanted to take a look at this, and I was pretty excited because I had this in my shopping cart back in December like 3 or 4 times, and ultimately I ended up not purchasing it. So when they asked if I wanted to review it, I jumped at the opportunity. So here's my sort of non-technical average Joe review of the M5. What's good, everybody? Ken here. You're watching OriginaldoBo, and this is my sort of first impression thoughts of the AnkerMake M5. Now, just to be clear, I'm going to be reviewing this 3D printer, and I'm using review loosely. I'm going to be giving you some thoughts and impressions from this from how I use it, and I wanted to use this in my 3D print store to see if it could help maximize production and some of the parts that we produce and sell every single day. So firstly, let's just talk about the design of this 3D printer. The design of this is unlike any other 3D printer on the market today. Now, it is an i3 design, which is essentially a bed slinger, very similar to what Prusa has. The bed moves forwards and backwards, but unlike artillery and Creality machines, this has a very complete look to it. As we look over this printer, there's no real open areas or exposed wires that require any sort of wire shrouding. Everything is very complete and connected via USBC cables all the way across the board, which makes for a very complete and clean looking experience. The base is solid aluminum, and then there's a plastic covering that protects the motherboard and the Z motors that are directly beneath here. Now, there are 2 motors, 2-stepper motors for the Z carriage that goes overhead, and they are connected via USB-C. Super easy to install. 4 bolts hold each of these pillars for the gantry in place on the base. Unfortunately, it is still belt driven. You're not going to find any linear rails on this, which would have been a nice touch, but I get it. It would have raised the cost. But overall, it doesn't seem like it prevents it from moving as fast as it could. And it doesn't make it very much louder either. So that is a nice thing. Now, this is a direct drive printer, meaning that the drive is directly located in the extruder. So if you want to print some of those softer materials like TPU, you will not have any issues doing so. Matter of fact, the vast majority of prints I have tested on the M5 have been TPU, and I've been pretty happy so far with how they have come out. And I think the default profile on the M5 for the slicer is actually pretty decent. And yes, there is a proprietary slicer that you can download and use, but if you don't want to use their proprietary slicer, you can use a Prusa slicer if you find that more convenient. We'll touch more on that here in a little bit. But overall, I've tested multiple materials from PETG, PLA, PLA+, and TPU, and all of them have done really well. I haven't had any issues. AnkerMake also includes a textured build plate, which makes for bed adhesion to be just an absolute breeze. Matter of fact, all of my printers in this office utilize a textured build plate. Since I've switched over to these textured build plates, I've had 0 issues with bed adhesion. It's very seldom that I have a problem, and same can be said here on the AnkerMake. And then powering it on and calibrating is a breeze. You just let it run through its homing process. There's no bed leveling to compete with, nothing. Load your filament and start printing. It's just that easy. There is a pressure sensor in the nozzle of this 3D printer, which makes bed leveling a lot easier than something like a Creality or an artillery machine, which I really do appreciate. There's also this capacitive touchscreen center here where you can control the prints and navigate things a lot more easy than you can on other printers. This is probably one of the best capacitive touchscreens that I've seen on a 3D printer thus far. You're not going to find any SD card slot on this printer. Instead, they've opted for a USB-C port at the very top, which you can go ahead and put a USB-C thumb drive in. I would highly recommend that you purchase one because I've looked through the entire kit and it doesn't appear that the kit comes with a thumb drive, although these are cheap enough nowadays where you can get a 32 gig thumb drive for like 10 bucks at Best Buy. So not really a big deal there. You may not be able to hear it because of the Adobe AI audio processing, but the fan is on right now and it is pretty loud, and this fan stays on pretty much constantly throughout the duration of this printer being powered on. I would turn the fan off, or I should say I would turn the printer off, but it would change the audio output from Adobe AI, so I'm just going to leave it on. But just know that while this printer is stationary in the on position, it is pretty loud, even after it's been done printing for quite a while. Now there are fans on the extruder, 2 fans to be exact, and they will ramp up quite heavily during certain prints. When I'm printing TPU, I usually have those fans set to 100% to make sure I don't get much stringing. So far, I haven't had really any, quality problems with the printer as far as TPU goes. I have had some minor issues printing at the fastest settings on the PLA Plus. Now they did include some PLA Plus for me to try, in which it's white PLA, so I really don't print with that. So I did print a model that I downloaded. I did an articulating dragging, and I really didn't have any problems with that print. I printed it at a 0.10 layer height, and I wanted to see how long it would take, and it took roughly about 8.5 hours at 0.10 on its fastest setting, which I think is still pretty darn impressive for the type of print that this was. Now, one of the main things about this printer is they boast incredibly fast speeds of 500 millimeters per second. And I will say, while it can go incredibly fast, the faster you go with this print, it will degrade the quality. So what I have found for me in my models that I print is 250 millimeters seems to be the perfect sweet spot, which if we're using this little touchscreen, on the touchscreen, it will be the 3x speed option, which I found to be the perfect spot between speed and quality of my prints, and it works well. Now, with that being said, one nice thing about this printer is as your print is going, you can monitor it from the built-in camera, and that built-in camera does work with the application that they do offer. They offer this AnkerMake companion app, which you can download, set up an account, and bind it to your 3D printer. Now, you're going to want to make sure too your printer is on the latest version of software, because a couple of versions ago there was some issues with the app connectivity, but that seems to be resolved on the latest version of software. There's also AI detection, which will pause your print if it detects a problem. Now, this thing went off several times on certain prints that I was doing, certain models, because it was detecting the designs in the print as a defect, but it wasn't. It was just part of the print. So it's really simple. You just click clear and it'll keep printing. It's one of those quirky things that I wish I can just turn this off on the print. Now, there is an AI file that you can just disregard if you don't want the AI detection to be on. So that's something to keep in mind, that there is AI detection. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's not perfect, but it is getting better. But in all the instances, I've never had a failed print that it actually told me that the print failed on. It was always on a print that was completed successfully when the AI detection went off. You can also slice and wirelessly send your prints directly to the printer. This is something that I've used on other brands and I've absolutely loved. This is something that works incredibly well, and it just makes this a lot more convenient to use. I wish all printers had this same option to wirelessly send these prints in a non-convoluted manner, but I think AnkerMake does this just as well as BREW does. BREW has the Handy app, AnkerMake has the Make app, but both of these manufacturers do the online printing process seamlessly, and it works well. Now, when I first got this, I was trying to send the prints directly to the printer, and I kept getting a failure, and I had to reset the Wi-Fi connection in order for that to work. So if you do have this and you are having that problem, reset your Wi-Fi connection and you'll find that the prints will go to the printer, no issue. One other thing to note, the file type is an A code, which is essentially some sort of archive code that contains the G code, because there are two files being sent to this printer. There's an AI file and the actual code that it's going to be printing your slice from. So a little bit weird, but so far I do find that it works really well. Now let's talk about the slicer, the AnkerMake slicer. The Make slicer is pretty simplistic. I still feel like there could be more features added to this, and I'm sure they will as they start developing it, but it is not as mature as something like the Cura slicer or even the Prusa slicer. Hell, it's not even as mature as the bamboo slicer, but that's okay because you can use the Prusa slicer with this. Prusa's recently included the models and profiles for the AnkerMake in their latest version of slicer. So if you want to use that, you totally can. You would just have to slice and send your files over to the AnkerMake slicer to be able to send it wirelessly, or you can just use a USB-C thumb drive, which works perfectly fine. One nice thing is once your files are on your thumb drive, you can access them from the application, which is fantastic if you want to print remotely and monitor them. This is something I've done several times throughout the week. I'm out during the day, I want to test a print, the build plate is clear, I just send the print over and it just worked flawlessly. So overall, I have zero quality control issues with the printer. I think it's fantastic. The prints coming off this are equally as well. I don't really see any quality issues. Just like any printer, no profiles are going to be perfect out of the box, and you will need to do some tuning, especially with the TPU. But if you switch over and use your Prusa slicer, you'll have a lot more fine-tuning control that you won't find on the AnkerMake slicer. But if you want to just have a simplistic experience, using the easy mode works perfectly fine as well. So, conclusions. I think that this is a fantastic first entry for AnkerMake. Things I would like to see better on this printer, I would like to see it to be a little bit smaller. It is a pretty big footprint for the size build plate that it offers. It's a 235 by 235 build plate, pretty similar to what you find on the Prusa Mark III, but it's just a big, wide piece of material, which makes it, for me, a little bit cumbersome to stow away when not in use, or if I wanted to add this into my lineup, I'd have to find a spot where I can fit it. The other thing I don't like is that the build plate here doesn't have any guides to actually stop it. I wish they would have had two little pins on the back here to stop it from going off. So when you're putting your build plate back on after removing prints, you do have to be a little bit more careful making sure that you do line it up. And then the last thing that I want to make mention of is the fact that sometimes the wireless prints do not work. It is very finicky, but that is something that I think they will probably improve on as the time goes on. So all in all, I gotta say, pretty impressive. And they do give you quite a bit of accessories with this printer, which I think was pretty cool. So I just want to show this really quick before we end the video. They do give you a toolkit to assemble it and just maintain the overall maintenance of the toolkit, which I really like. Comes with all of your Allen keys, snips, a spare Bowden tube, a cleaner for your nozzle, a spare nozzle, a tool to remove your nozzle, and of course, all the heads for the Allen keys right here, along with the main Allen key here, which I think is pretty awesome. Like, I've never seen a company include a toolkit like this in such a nice little case, which is pretty cool. So yeah, all in all, I'm definitely impressed with it. I wouldn't say it's the fastest 3D printer on the market right now. It is faster than most, but it also costs $800. So something else you have to keep in mind if you're looking for a printer, this is $800. There's a lot of options on the market that are cheaper than this. But I will say this, I don't think you're going to find a better looking 3D printer that is in such a complete fashion that I have this much confidence in than the AnkerMake M5. Just saying. I still love my bamboo printers, but this one definitely takes a close second in terms of design and just overall function. As I'm getting used to it and starting to slice more and more with it, I gotta say, it is incredibly impressive. Now, I will be doing a series of videos on this 3D printer as time goes on, giving you updates as firmware changes. Also, there is a multi-filament engine that they are coming out with eventually called the Engine V6. It's a multi-filament utility. If that utility is capable of using TPU, for me, somebody who prints a lot of TPU, that will be an absolute game changer. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I'll go ahead and continue to update you all on how this performs as updates roll out for it. But if you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments section down below. And as always, stay original.